Hey everybody, and welcome back to CALLOUS Draft League Semifinals, Season 1 Playoffs. As you know, if you've been following along, we have the purple team against the orange team. However, we have had all individual drafts up to this point. This is one of the two team drafts. Like I said, banging out these drafts in the order in which they complete in real time. This happens to be the next one that got done. So, we've got the purple team kicking off on the left-hand side, represented by Darth Tyros, Wraxius Gaming, and team captain Kingu. And then, of course, representing the orange on the other side, TRowe, Captain Awesomeness, and undefeated 6-0, a large Mongoose for the orange team. So, I assume by now, if you've been following along, you know the format. I don't want to talk about rules, I just want to get into the action. So let's go ahead and begin. As you know, the double pick on the left-hand side, and they are going to keep it pretty tight and boring and standard. This seems to be the 1-2 that most teams prefer. Metagross and Titar. The question is, how do you respond to it? And this is going to be what they're going to do. It's going to be Celebi for TRowe into the unknown opponent. Skarm into meta. And then Starmie, actually, into Tyranitar. Which I find a little interesting, but sure. I mean, it's not a bad pick. It just, it's interesting. Because it's not a guarantee in that matchup. Like I said, Pursuitar can get you. DD Bug can be like EV to always survive Surf, or hell, even Hydro Pump if you really want, and then get you back with boosted HP Bug. We'll see. I don't hate the pick. One thing that is cool is taking Starmie right when you take Skarmory to immediately make it so there's one less good spinner option available to your opponent. So there's that. I think these might be better the other way, though. Like, it's a lot of the time it isn't just the pick, it's the order. And I wonder, in my mind, Skarm is going to perform better against Titar, and certainly Starmie is going to perform better against Meta, in my opinion. I think that bulky Starmie with T-Wave and Recover handles damn near anything. Not Boom, obviously, but damn near anything that Metagross wants to throw at it. So I would feel comfortable with that matchup personally, but these picks aren't bad. I might nitpicky, swap the order around, but it is cool that they're taking Skarm and Starmie at the same time to try to help out a teammate a little bit. So, as you know, Darth Tyros now is going to have the double pick, and this seems to be a very common double pick in this position. Going to go with Salamence and Lax. You guys already know I don't want to be a broken effing record because I feel like I've had, if not these exact picks, a very similar conversation too many times already. I don't like taking Lax into Celebi. I also don't like taking Lax this early in the format. People are doing it anyway. If you're going to do this, I think you should run Boom Lax and try to bait Celebi and take it down with you. I think if you go Curse Rest Lax into Celebi, that's just flat out a mistake and something that you shouldn't be doing, and you deserve to lose. But we'll see how Tyros approaches it. Mince into Celebi is fine. So, on the other side, Orange now is going to get the triple pick, and they are going to respond as follows. And I like these picks quite a bit. Hariyama, Zapdos, and Aerodactyl. Yeah, these all make sense to me. So, Hariyama into Tar I think is a great generalized counter. There's not really any set of Tar that's amazing into Hariyama. The best you can do is like DD Double Edge or DD some random HP Flying or something, which is absolute garbage. Yama really is a very safe counter. It can handle the special and the physical side, and obviously it threatens a one-hit KO with the stab fighting typing, so on board with that for sure. I think that's a great response to Titar, and he's got a nice little 1-2 for that matchup. Pursuitar does potentially eat Starmie under the right circumstances, so that's a little bit weird, but that's nitpicky, and I think for the most part it's a good response for Mongoose. Zapdos into Metagross is a response that I'm always fond of. Also, Zapdos and Skarm, an obvious pairing, so I think that that's good as well. And then Aerodactyl is fine here. Obviously, you have to watch out for getting paralyzed by a Body Slam, for example, from the Lax. You also don't want to get boomed on, but for the most part, if all things are equal, if they start out at the same place, Aerodactyl is a pretty good matchup against these, and I also think that taking it away when you have B on your team, when you have Zapdos on your team, when you have Starmie on your team, I think not passing Aerodactyl back is also a wise decision. So here is the follow-up. They're going to go with Milotic for Kingu, and then Blissey for Wraxius. I don't know about the Milotic. I mean, it might just be taking the best thing and just not passing it back, which is fine. But I don't know that Milotic actually matches up all that well into Starmie or into Hariyama. Against Starmie, if it's just like Recover T-Bolt, you lose. And then against the Hariyama, I mean, I don't know. I guess it's kind of a wash depending on the set. Maybe even Milotic wins if it's non-Rest Yama, but it very well might be Rest Yama. But I'd be worried about knockoff, and I wouldn't want to take, whether it's Cross Chop or Focused Punch, wouldn't want to take a crit. I don't actually know that Milo beats Yama. That one's a little more neutral, but I think it's met into Hariyama, like even at best. And I think it's not good into Starmie. So as good as Milotic is, I wonder if that was the right pick there. I kind of wonder if he could have gone a different way. But I don't hate Milotic. Again, it's just so early that they're just focusing on taking the best stuff off the board. Milotic certainly qualifies among those. And I wouldn't want to take, say, Regice here into a Hariyama and have double fighting weakness into a fighter already on the other side. And then same thing, I mean, you can go Swampert here, but it really doesn't fare that much better than Milo does into this stuff. So I guess for lack of better alternative, maybe it is just Milo. And then Blissey in this middle matchup. I mean, it's just too early to say. Blissey obviously is always going to be good against Zap, but two good pokes for both. Too early to really draw much of anything from this matchup. So we swing back to Captain Awesomeness, and then we move our way to the left. He's going to go with Charizard, and then it's going to be Gengar for TRowe. Probably a little earlier than most people pick Zard, but it makes sense in the matchup. Obviously, the Fire and then Focus Punch combination is going to threaten both of Metagross and Blissey. So far, so good. Charizard pick, acceptable here. I don't feel like you're blatantly missing out on something. You can make an argument here, perhaps, that one of these guys is supposed to take Swampert. I don't really love passing that back, so maybe you can find a reason whether you want to throw Swampert into Salamence or whether you want to throw Swampert into Metagross. Maybe that should have gotten grabbed in one of these spots, but passing that back, a little bit questionable. Beyond that, I think the picks make sense for the matchup. Gengar is interesting. It can be EV to always live +1 HP flying from Salamence, but Salamence can also be EV to always live Ice Punch from Gengar, so kind of a wash. The existence of the Gengar, unless he is to pick up a Pursuit user like Houndoom or something, is going to prompt the Lax to have to run Shadow Ball, and it also makes my plan, my suggested plan of trying to boom on the Celebi a little bit riskier, because obviously if you click Self-Destruct and Gengar switches in, you're unhappy with your life choices. So I think the Gengar pick is fine. Like I said, my one nitpick about this round is probably Swampert should have gotten grabbed somewhere, perhaps over the Charizard, because I think even though Charizard is legitimately a threat to Metagross and Blissey, I think if you were to go Swampert and just go EQ Focus Punch and be faster than Blissey, I think that is a threat to both of them in a similar way. So that's probably what I would have done, but these picks aren't bad. Moving it over to the other side, we've got... This is not what I expected him to take, but bear with me. We're going to grab Moltres, Raikou, and then also Swampert, of course. I think I hate the Moltres pick. I don't really see the merit against Starmie Hariyama. I mean, the Starmie alone generally beats it. I mean, yeah, you can crit him on the way in with HP Grass or whatever. That's fine. But other than that, you generally lose that 1v1. So I don't know that I love that decision. And then against the Hariyama, I mean, it can go either way. You can, if you want to just wall the fire part of it, you can go Thick Fat Yama. But obviously you have to worry about Will-O-Wisp or Toxic. If you want to beat that part, then you can just go Guts. But then you don't take Fire Blasts or Overheats as well. You can theoretically be bursted down when you come in. Usually the happy medium, because I was leaning that it was just going to be a Rest Yama anyway. I think you just go Thick Fat plus Rest, and it just covers all bases. So if you get Will-O-Wisp or Toxic, you just rest it away, and you're in no danger of being Fire Bursted down because you have Thick Fat. So I think this Moltres is not a good pick, and I think it's something that's going to be very largely neutralized by what Mongoose already has. I think it's a wasted pick, and I think that Kingu is not off to a fantastic start in this matchup. Wraxius on the flip side is going to take Raikou. Not a mon that I generally love this early, but it makes a ton of sense given what is on the other side. Obviously, it threatens all three of these mons for awesomeness to a varying degree, and he currently has no special wall in sight, but hopefully for his sake, he's going to pick up Regice or something when it comes back to him. And the Swampert here for Tyros is a gift that keeps on giving. I mean, that just shouldn't be there. Like I said, this format, everything is so relative and so interconnected that one little screw up for one person translates to a gift for another, which forces the next person into a weird position, which becomes a gift for another. It all just snowballs. It all just rolls downhill. And I think that this is the beginning of an avalanche like that. In this case, I think this Charizard pick shouldn't have been made. I think Swampert should have been taken. Now, Swampert goes to Tyros that he shouldn't have. All of a sudden, the opponent's Aerodactyl is much worse than it should be. Now, all of a sudden, Tyros doesn't have to force some crappy Rock Resist, some Claydol, some Steelix, whatever, into the lineup because he now has a really good one. Tyros' team now, I think, is quite a bit better than it's supposed to be, and I think Awesomeness taking Zard really messed things up. Wraxius' pick I like, but the past round or two, I think you can question some of the picks. The Moltres I don't think is good. The Charizard pick was okay, but looking a little bit more long term, I think it was actually kind of meh, kind of bad. The Raikou pick is good, and the Swampert pick shouldn't have happened, but obviously with it available, you take it there. So a large Mongoose now is going to have the double pick before we swing it back, and the two mons that interest him, Regirock and Jolteon. There's a reason this guy is 6-0, and I think this is a nice little taste of that. Despite, air quotes, more powerful things being available on the board, these very well might be the exactly perfect picks. The dude understands the format. So, Regirock is obviously going to be a threat here. It's good against any kind of physical tar, and then obviously it insta-deletes Moltres. Not so good against Milotic, but that's okay. You can just boom on it, and not everything has to beat everything. And obviously the Jolteon makes a ton of sense in the matchup. Big threat to the Moltres and the Milotic, and can just baton pass out of the way if you're against the T-Tar. It makes perfect sense in this spot. Very much favor Mongoose's side of the matchup in the early goings of this draft. So now we swing it back to the purple team, and they are going to go with Houndoom into Gengar, so that makes sense. Vaporeon, she needs a bulky water, that makes sense. And then Regice into someone who already has Hariyama and Regirock. That doesn't make as much sense. Now, granted, you've got to do what you've got to do. There's a Starmie and a Jolteon on the other side that are currently going insane on you, so you need a special wall. I guess this is gonna have to do. But I think early missteps in this matchup by Kingu, with basically perfect drafting so far from a large Mongoose, is gonna lead to a place where it's hard to come back. I think we're already there. Yeah, the Regice helps shore up the Jolteon and Starmie, but boy is that cold comfort. It's not good against the Yama and the Regirock. The Jolteon can just baton pass out of you. The Starmie, if you don't have rest, I mean, either the Regice gets worn down or it gets forced to sleep, but either way, that's bad when things like Yama and Regirock can come in. Necessary evil, he's going to need a special wall, but man, I think large Mongoose clearly has an advantage in the C matchup here. As far as Wraxius taking Vaporeon, it makes perfect sense. Like I said, she needs a bulky water. There's a Charizard on the other side. Why wouldn't you grab that here? Her picks so far have been straightforward, and they've all made sense. Houndoom, good into Gengar, flat out, boom, done, period. But there happens to also be a Celebi on the other side as well. Obviously, it's good against that too, so this pick makes a ton of sense. And if he's greedy enough, if he's confident that the Houndoom can eat the Gengar, which isn't a guarantee, but bear with me, if he's confident that he can make that happen, that frees up the Lax to not have to have Shadow Ball anymore. And the possibilities are endless if he's relying on the Gengar not being there. So I think Tyros, especially with that Swampert gift against the Aerodactyl that shouldn't have happened, is setting himself up for a pretty good matchup as well. So we go back to finish round 2 with TRowe and Captain Awesomeness, and they're going to finish it like this. Heracross into Salamence and Houndoom. Okay. And then also CptAwe into an opponent who doesn't have spikes, just took Vaporeon, and has a Metagross that you're not great against. Needless to say, I don't love these picks from Orange's side. I think that, like I said, the Heracross being picked into the Salamence is pretty questionable. I don't even know that Heracross is necessarily amazing in this matchup. Obviously, it's a threat to Lax, but, like, woohoo. The Houndoom, it depends on the nature and stuff for both of them, but generally Houndoom can outspeed Heracross and obviously threaten it with a one-hit KO. I mean, all you're doing is forcing the Houndoom to run plus speed, which is fine. It can happily do that. And then, like I said, Salamence can more or less check Heracross all day, so I don't see the Heracross necessarily being all that effective here, even if it's theoretically good against Lax. It doesn't even switch into Lax, so not excited about that either. I would much rather have TRowe taken something like Wheezing or a bulky Water here. The Heracross pick does not excite me. And then CptAwe doesn't make a lot of sense. Awesomeness might feel like he just needs a Rock Resist, but like there's a bunch of them available. You can just grab any number of CptAwe, Donphan, Flygon, whatever the case may be down the road. I don't know why you need this one right now, but there's no spikes on the other side. CptAwe does not beat any of these except maybe Raikou if it isn't CM Crunch 1v1. And I don't really think it does much of anything in the matchup, so I don't think I love that pick either. Right now, unfortunately, I don't feel like any of these matchups are all that close. I have Tyros and Wraxius definitely ahead, and I have Mongoose definitely ahead of Kingu. But we still have half the draft to go. Things can change. Let's proceed. Wraxius is going to pick up Fortress. Well, if she does decide to bring spikes, she now has a spiker that basically beats the CptAwe 1v1. Can CptAwe bring HP Fire? Sure. Is HP Fire CptAwe good? Nope, never. But if Wraxius forces that crappy moveset out of Awesomeness, fine. And if Awesomeness doesn't bring it, then Fori will win the 1v1 in that matchup, and Fori is good against Skarm. Currently, Awesomeness has no Ghost to protect those spikes. See if he picks up Dusclops or something down the line. But the Fori pick makes sense, and I think round 5-ish is about the right time to take it in the format. Obviously, there is a Charizard on the other side, but none of this other stuff can all that happily or easily run a fire attack. So I feel like Fori should feel pretty safe in the matchup. And then Kingu is going to go with Gardevoir. This guy, or gal, I guess, is very popular in recent drafts. I'm not sure where the surge in popularity came from. It feels like such a random pick in this matchup. I mean, in a world where a Gyarados would help you, a Dragonite would help you, a Rock Resist would help you. I could think of all sorts of things I feel like Kingu needs, and Gardevoir wasn't one of them. Like I said, I can envision taking Flygon here. I could see Gyarados or Dragonite, but maybe you're afraid to add a third Rock weakness. I could see... Oh, there's so many things. I don't understand what Gardevoir really adds here. There's one Psychic weakness on the other side. There's things that outspeed it. It's not like you switch into like Regirock very well, or take Rock Slides or physical attacks in general very well. And I don't know what you're tracing either. I mean, it's just Volt Absorb, which doesn't prevent you from getting T-Waved or from Jolteon just Baton passing out. I don't get it. I don't really get what the Gardevoir is supposed to do in this matchup, or how it solves the problems that he has. I mean, it is a fight resist, I guess, but with a pretty hard asterisk on it. I mean, does Gardevoir really beat Hariyama? Can it really switch in safely? I don't know, man. That pick doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't know what Kingu's doing in this draft, but I definitely think Mongoose is ahead at the moment. And these feel like ridiculously strong picks for Orange coming back, given how late it is. So this is a very, very powerful round 3. So it's going to be Gyarados, Dragonite, and Registeel. I mean, that's about as good of a value in team draft as you're ever going to get in the 3rd round. So Gyarados is being picked into this A matchup. It doesn't necessarily do anything incredible and specific here, but it is a good Mon, and there's no good rock attackers on the other side. Mence and Lax, in theory. I mean, Swampert too. Any of those things can have Rock Slide, but none of them are good at it. The Gyarados Intimidate is not the most relevant thing, but it's still nice to have against the Mence and the Lax. And I think it fits the team for the most part for TRowe. I harken back to this Swampert shouldn't be there. And if the Swampert were something else, I would like TRowe's end so much better. But as it stands, I still think the Gyarados is a fine pick. Dragonite is always a Mon that I approve of, always a Mon that I like. Again, you could just make up a set, top of your head. Okay, it's got Focus Punch, Flamethrower, T-Bolt, and Earthquake. There you go. That covers literally everything that Wraxius has over here. So you can mix and match the Dragonite and give it whatever coverage you need it to have to hit the entire damn team. Probably the kind of Pokemon that he needs in order to get back. I still think Wraxius probably at an advantage in this matchup, but Dragonite definitely very much helps. And Mongoose here with the Registeel. Yeah, that's going to shut off the Regice forever. It's going to sit on the Milotic forever. It's going to sit on the overwhelming majority of Tar sets forever. Probably doesn't have to fear the Gardevoir either. Maybe CM Fire Punch, but the Registeel just solidifies what is already a good matchup and already a solid team for Mongoose. Tyros now has the double pick, and he's going to go with Weezing and Tauros here. These picks both make sense. You're taking Weezing. I mean, into Heracross alone is good enough. If it were just Heracross and just protecting his Lax, that would be good enough. You wouldn't need anything else. But he's also protecting the Tauros he just took. He's also protecting his Mence. It's also going to be good against any physical set of Gyro, which is the overwhelming majority of them, and any physical set of Aerodactyl, which is the overwhelming majority of them. Weezing really, really good in this matchup. Already thought Tyros was ahead in the matchup. Now I think he's more ahead. As far as the Tauros, we'll see. A second Intimidate Mon certainly could matter when there's a plethora of physical Mons on the other side. Obviously, Tauros into Gengar, not perfect, but, and same thing, Tauros into Intimidate, Tauros into a normal resist. I mean, it's not perfect by any means. I don't dislike the Tauros. I could take or leave that pick. I don't think it's a bad pick, but I think there's probably something better that he could have taken. But the Weezing pick, I think, is very important and very valuable in the matchup. So we'll see if the Tauros ends up getting played, but certainly the Weezing is going to be there. Of note, though, if the plan is still for Houndoom to remove Gengar, all of a sudden the Tauros looks a lot better. So that could be the thought process for Tyros. Like I said, feel like Tyros is ahead in that matchup. Back to Orange. It is going to be Glalie, and then Miltank, and then Donphan. All right. So Glalie is being picked into an opponent who doesn't have a spinner. Simple as that. Is Glalie fantastic in the matchup? No. Obviously, T-Tower, Moltres, and probably Gardevoir all threaten it. At the same time, it can sit on Milotic and Regice forever. And like I said, the more crucial thing, it's a spiker. Opponent doesn't have a spinner, and his teammate just took Donphan, so these spinner options are getting thinner for Kingu. He might be forced to take a Blastoise or something along those lines, which is not exciting in the matchup with the Starmie and the Jolteon on the other side, and the fact that the spiker itself can basically sit on it. But there's not that many good spinners left. He could take Cloyster, but it has the same problem with the electric weakness. He could take not Donphan anymore. Tentacruel has the same problem with the electric weaknesses. Leaves Kingu kind of in a weird spot if he wants to address these spikes, which, with a team that is 4 out of 5 grounded right now, I would recommend addressing them. But don't know what his options are to do that, but they're probably not great at this stage of the draft. Miltank in the middle matchup doesn't really change anything, in my opinion. It's always a good Gloomon, but I don't see any specific reason to take that in this matchup. It does give him a second Heal Bell option, so he shouldn't be worried about status, but I don't think as it sits, status is how he was going to lose this matchup anyway. And then, yeah, Thick Fat doesn't seem overly relevant here, so I don't know that I understand the Miltank pick. I'll find Mon, but Seems like a random generic mon that gets thrown in here rather than being picked for a specific reason. The Donphan for TRowe, 2 birds, 1 stone. He needs a rock resist. Donphan is obviously that. And then you're also taking a spinner to help a large Mongoose out and really leaving Kingu in the weeds with very few good options, because Kingu also needed a rock resist and a spinner, and that just got cut off from him, so I really don't know how Kingu is going to fill both of those voids from where we are now. I don't know what rock resist he's picking up. A lot of them are very vulnerable here. Like I said, if he grabs like Flygon or something to resist the Regirock, that's great, but is that really good with Glalie, Starmie, Jolteon on the other side? Kingu, I think, is really between a rock and a hard place. I don't know what he's going to grab in these last couple picks to try to pull this out, but I think he is very much backed into a corner right now. Well, we can at least see how he finishes this round, which is a Pokemon that I am always a huge fan of in Medicham. And then it's also going to be Alakazam in the middle for Wraxius, into an opponent who doesn't really have a fantastic special wall. The Medicham is definitely a threat here. There's 3 fighting weaknesses on the other side, and the only thing that really handles Medicham consistently on the other side is the Starmie. So I think this is a good pickup for sure. I think that this is the exact kind of thing that he needs in order to get back in the matchup. I still favor a large Mongoose's end as a whole, but I think the Medicham definitely helps and exposes maybe a little bit of a weakness for a large Mongoose. We'll see how he deals with it. Like I said, Starmie right now is the primary answer, but it is far from safe. It can just get blown up with Shadow Ball. He's going to need something, whether it is an Arcanine or a dedicated fighting resist, noting that Weezing is off the table. Gun needs something for the Cham. It has high potential to do a lot of damage in this matchup. Otherwise, Mongoose is going to have to get creative and have random counters or weird EVs or pinch berries or whatever just to deal with the stupid Medicham. So I do think that Kingu gained significant ground in the matchup with the Medicham pick. Still don't think he's winning, but that definitely caught him up because I thought he was really, really behind prior to the Medicham pick. The Alakazam is into an opponent that doesn't really have a special wall. Zapdos can function as a special wall, and in this matchup, perhaps it should. I think the Raikou Vaporeon Alakazam is more than enough to say that the Zapdos should be some kind of bulky rest, maybe even rest talk set, but nevertheless, the Alakazam seems like a pretty solid threat in the matchup, and I don't really see too many fantastic special walls that Awesomeness could pick up at this point to address that. Umbreon comes to mind immediately. There's also Hypno, Articuno, what have you. But as it stands, the Alakazam, definitely a threat in the matchup. So we move over to the 4th and final round as we draw closer to concluding this draft. And it's going to start with Captain Awesomeness, of course. He's going to go with the trio of moles. And then his teammate, going to be a homie, and take Porygon 2 immediately. So, the Dugtrio seems reasonable in this matchup. Obviously, it's going to eat Raikou. The Zap-Dug OU combo, as we know, can beat Blissey if it's going to be a beat-up Dugtrio, which it probably should be in this case. And then it can pick off the Metagross as well. Also of note is that the entire team for Wraxius is grounded, therefore Dugtrio is going to trap everything and have some play against everything. So again, you guys say that I'm a big Dugtrio hater. That might be true generally speaking, but there have been plenty of times where I compliment Doug picks and where I think picking Dugtrio is good. And this is one of those times. It's very circumstance specific. Under the right circumstances, it's a good pick. I think Dugtrio is a great pick, is the perfect pick here. That's exactly the thing to pick. So I'm not always negative on Dugtrio. People just pick it when they're not supposed to. But this is one of those times where it makes perfect sense. Like I said, the whole damn team grounded and multiple good trappable targets here. So I like the Dugtrio pick. It makes a lot of sense. That's probably the perfect pick here. Good for Captain Awesomeness. That certainly helps. The Porygon 2, more than anything, is probably just helping out his teammate who just took Dugtrio, but if you want to run that as a bulky water against the Salamence, I think that is a fine decision, since he doesn't actually have a proper bulky water. I wonder if down the road if he should take Slowbro or whatever bulky water he prefers that's remaining. But for now, you need something close to a bulky water anyway, and like I said, it helps out the Dugtrio, but Porygon 2 can be reasonable as a check to Salamence. Maybe a little bit against the Tauros, but primarily against the Mence, which currently TRowe does not switch all that well into. So the purple triple pick is as follows. They're going to go with Flygon, a much-needed rock resist, though it does have those problems that we discussed. Kingdra, and then Typhlosion. Huh. Okay, so the Flygon, like I said, I mean, a rock resist is much needed here, period. So I guess that is the lesser evil. That's probably one of the best rock resists remaining. There aren't that many good ones left. You've got to do what you've got to do, and it does threaten the Registeel, the Regirock, and to a lesser extent the Jolteon, but you're never really hitting the Jolteon. It's just going to Baton Pass out, or it can HP Ice you, but Jolteon can't safely switch into it, and it's the same deal. The entire team here for Mongoose is grounded, so the Flygon definitely helps because right now clicking Earthquake is free. There's not even a resistance for a large Mongoose. So as much as I liked Mongoose's matchup before, these last two picks have really changed things, and Kingu has given himself a much better chance than he previously had because right now nothing safely switches into Medicham or into Flygon, and that's going to be hard at this stage of the draft to address. Like I said, Weezing I think would be the perfect thing that really covers both of them, but that isn't an option. So this matchup is perhaps starting to shift as well. I really thought Mongoose was ahead for the vast majority of it, but I'm not so sure anymore. That one is going to be very much worthy of keeping an eye on. Interesting for Wraxius that she takes another grounded poke. This one isn't necessarily Dug vulnerable, but it is noteworthy. I wonder why Awesomeness, I mean, the spike seems so good in the matchup. I wonder why Awesomeness hasn't picked up Dusclops or something to try to protect them, because the whole team for Wraxius is grounded. So, I mean, those spikes are going to be devastating as long as you can keep them down. So I feel like Awesomeness, with his last pick, should certainly take Dusclops and try to keep those spikes floating. But without getting ahead of ourselves here, so the Kingdra is a pretty good threat against the team for Awesomeness. As we already discussed, there is no proper special wall on the other side. Zapdos kinda, sorta, but it doesn't really love rain-boosted Surfs or Hydro Pumps, or just Ice Beams from the Kingdra. I think it could absolutely be a threat in the matchup. I think that once Rain is going, a lot of this stuff is very much in trouble. Claydol and Zard, obviously not wanting to take rain-boosted attacks when they're outsped by Kingdra. The Knight, obviously vulnerable to Ice Beam. None of this stuff really likes switching in, so Kingdra from an offensive standpoint makes plenty of sense in this matchup. And then the Typhlosion pick, guys, your guess is as good as mine. Tyros is a weirdo. He likes weird mons. This is just up his alley. I don't think he's going to play it. Yeah, as a fire attacker, you threaten Celebi, you threaten Heracross. It also learns Thunder Punch, so I mean, there's that for Gyarados and Arrow, I guess, in theory, but I don't think Typhlosion is good. I don't think Typhlosion will be played. I guess I should note that it does learn Reversal, so if he wants to have the option of having a Reversal user, and now you have one. But like I said, don't think he's going to play it. Don't think he should play it. So a large Mongoose here has the double pick, and he never does necessarily address the issues here, but there's only so many things you could do at this stage of the draft with two things left, but he's going to have an entirely grounded team here as he picks up Venusaur and Jinx with his final two picks. Interesting. I don't know that that's necessarily what I thought was gonna get grabbed here, but the Venusaur seems reasonable. It's obviously threatened by the Moltres and the Regice, but it's decent against this other stuff. It is a fight resist for Medicham. Obviously, the grass part of it is good against Tara and Milotic. Leech Seed in general, obnoxious move with spikes that currently Kingu still does not have a spinner and still can't remove. I'm not sure about the Jinx. Regice, if it just has Psych Up, should be able to handle it just fine. Maybe you're now forcing the Regice to have Psych Up, but not the end of the world. And then I think some of this other stuff, Flygon could maybe outspeed Jinx, force it to really go max speed, something to that effect. The Moltres, I think, is reasonable against the Jinx. Doesn't necessarily switch into Ice Beams or Psychics amazingly, but is obviously a threat. We'll see on the Jinx. It's neither amazing nor terrible into Kingu. It's very interesting to me, though, that a large Mongoose has this full-on Spikes vulnerable team. I would think that surely Kingu is going to grab Cloyster or something and try to take advantage of that, right? Spoilers. No. So this is what they're going to do instead. They're going to go with Clefable, and then Misdreavus, and then Scizor. I'm going to go ahead and say that I disagree with a lot of these picks. I don't know that they're like maximizing their matchup here, which is what I think should be happening. The Clefable is a mon that I like and that I think is underrated, but I don't know that this is the matchup for it or that it really changes anything here. But third normal poke for Tyros, if that matters. Misdreavus is a mon that we know that Wraxius likes. We saw her with that weird CM T-Bolt HP Grass Rest Misdreavus, I think actually against the Orange team way back in week 2. She got a victory. She basically soloed the game, in fact, with that Misdreavus. Don't know if she's going to find the same success here, but it is a way to protect her spikes. Misdreavus, like Dusclops, is largely a pretty good wall against CptAwe. The CptAwe can and now should just run Shadow Ball, which I think is going to be the plan, but you do have at least some way to maybe deter Rapid Spin, and CM T-Bolt Misdreavus here is a threat against Skarmory, Charizard, and the like. Maybe it's even Bolt Beam so you can hit the Dragonite. I think that's fine as well. I don't understand the Scizor here. I get that there's a Regirock on the other side, a Glalie on the other side that are weak to the Steel part. I get that Starmie's weak to the Bug part. I get what you're doing, but I'm very, very surprised that Kingu doesn't take a Rapid Spinner here. Maybe there isn't one that he deems decent or acceptable in the matchup. I think I probably would have just sucked it up and taken Blastoise here or something to that effect, but if Kingu is just like going over the list of spinners and he asks himself, look, am I really going to play any of these? Are any of these good enough? And he's answered the question for himself and he believes that the answer is no, then fair enough. But we've got a couple of these matchups where the opponent is basically entirely grounded and the other player is not taking full advantage of it. Like I said, Captain Awesomeness is playing against an opponent with 7 out of 8 grounded Mons and has not taken a ghost to protect the spikes. That doesn't make sense to me. And then a large Mongoose's team is literally entirely grounded, but Kingu, despite having something like Cloyster, which solves both his spikes and his rapid spin problem, does not bother to take that either. He's going to go with Scizor, so that's a head scratcher to me. Regardless, the final picks are as follows. TRowe is actually going to be the one who takes Cloyster here, which is unusual to me. But that Cloyster is being picked into this matchup where it seems fine. Tyros doesn't have a spinner, so it's the same shit. This is a nice late addition here. Spikes do seem pretty good against him. And hell, Cloyster just has a physical wall, which might be a little strong. But Cloyster, with its very high base defense, might actually give him a small amount of help against the Mence, against the Swampert, against the Tauros. Maybe you can even live a Snorlax attack and then blow up on it or something. The Cloyster makes sense in the matchup. And then Awesomeness here. Yeah, I mean, got to make a choice between a Bulky Water and the Dusclops. Is going to go with the Bulky Water. I get why you would want Slowbro here, but I feel like somewhere in there, perhaps over the Miltank, it would have been really, really wise for Awesomeness to pick up Dusclops and try to prevent the spikes, or protect the spikes that seem so good against Wraxius. Man, interesting draft as a whole. It was back and forth. I don't know that anyone drafted perfectly. There were definitely peaks and valleys in this one where I liked that guy, then I liked that guy, and then I liked that guy, and they kind of went back and forth a bit. I think everybody did some degree of things that were good, things that I liked, and then things that I didn't necessarily think were so good and didn't necessarily like. It's going to make it interesting because, as you know, if you guys were paying attention the whole way through, at about the midway point, I felt very strongly Tyros and Wraxius winning, Kingu losing. Those are the matchups, 2-1 purple. But things did shift a little bit as we went on, and now it is a lot closer in many of these matchups, so let's examine them one at a time. This first matchup, the A seat, so that is going to be Tyros for purple against TRowe for orange. I don't know what to think anymore. I hearken back to the Swampert that I think should not be there. I think that was one of the biggest critiques of Captain Awesomeness and of the Orange draft as a whole, in that Charizard pick should have just been Swampert, and Tyros should never have had access to that. And I think his whole draft dramatically changed and improved when he picked up that Mon that he probably shouldn't have. And the Swampert is definitely going to be useful in the matchup. I thought the Wheezing pick was quite good. I thought the Tauros pick was fine, especially if you are counting the Gengar as being not there via the Houndoom. But some of the later picks didn't necessarily blow me away. I do like the first 5 from Tyros, but then Tauros maybe. It gets a lot worse with the Gyarados with Intimidate, the Donphan that can tank anything that you have and then counterattack, maybe literally with counter, on the swing back, and the non-guarantee that you're hitting Gengar. Also, Cloyster can tank Tauros as well, and then spike up or boom or what have you. So the Tauros I still don't think is bad, but I don't know that it's that great either. And I'm not blown away by either the Typhlosion or the Clefable, so I think Tyros is going to inevitably have at least one poke that I look at it and go, this thing is only okay. I think it'll probably just end up being the Tauros, but I suppose those other guys are playable. I would probably lean closer to the Clefable than the Typhlosion, but I don't have enough time in the short analysis that I do post-game here to really sit down and look at it and give too strong of an opinion. As far as TRowe, like I said, I think he picked it up a lot. In the end, I think the Rock Resist very necessary. The Donphan helps the matchup. The Porygon 2 helps the matchup. The Intimidate user, Gyarados, helps the matchup. And the Cloyster makes a lot of sense as well. I think that the Cloyster is the perfect pick. I think not only the defensive component of it with its physical defense, which is pretty relevant against almost an entirely physical-based team for Tyros, and then obviously the thing that comes up a lot in these drafts, picking up spikes when your opponent has no ability to remove them against a largely grounded team, against all but 2 Mons that are grounded on the other side. And then you factor in play skill. I don't know enough about TRowe price. Tyros is very swingy. He's good, but he's not great. He shows flashes, certainly. Tyros probably the better player, but he's just so polar and so inconsistent that it's hard to put too much stock or too much faith in him. I mean, if I'm taking the player thing out of it, or if I'm just operating that they're roughly equal, which again, I don't know TRowe, good, bad, or indifferent well enough to really have an opinion, but if I'm just looking at the drafts, I am actually going to shift my opinion from where I had been previously, and I'm going to predict that TRowe actually is going to take this one down. I don't know that it's a stomp by any means. We'll see if the Gengar gets cute and runs Focus Punch or Destiny Bond or something to that effect to get the Houndoom. And certainly if Tyros builds his whole plan around the Houndoom's not there, I'm going to run a Lax that can't touch it. I'm going to run a Physical Mence that isn't really thinking about Gengar, so on and so forth. And then the Gengar does manage with a Focus Punch or whatever to beat the Houndoom. I think Tyros would be in trouble. But regardless of that, I'm going to pick TRowe to win the matchup. So Wraxius and Captain Awesomeness. This one is interesting. Like I said, I fault Captain Awesomeness for not at some point picking up Dusclops because the spike seems so good. I feel like instead of the Miltank, you wish you had Dusclops here, and I think that would be pretty good in the matchup, both as a Zam check and also just to protect the spikes that Wraxius doesn't really have a fantastic answer for. Right now, she can just click Rapid Spin with Fori, and okay, guess that's that. But it did not have to be that way. Missed opportunity, I think, for Captain Awesomeness. I think the compelling thing for Wraxius, and I don't know that Captain ever really truly addressed this, is all the special attackers. It's the fact that, I mean, Raikou now to a lesser extent because of Dugtrio, but the fact that Alakazam and Kingdra can both just clean him up, and that there doesn't really seem to be all that great of an answer for Captain Awesomeness. He does have, like I said, a Zapdos that he can build as a special wall and that I probably would build as a special wall, but I still don't know that he really has the answers to the special attackers on the other side. Now, granted, some of the special attackers for Awesomeness are not great for Wraxius either. The Charizard, for as much of a hard time as I've given him, and as much as I still think it should have been Swampert, it is a threat. It is something she doesn't switch into well. It's kind of Vaporeon or bust, which is not perfect when spikes are down in theory. It also could be like Belly Drum Zard or something like that, which could be possibly a difficult set for Wraxius. I'm not sure. I've been leaning Wraxius for most of this, and I don't think it's a stomp necessarily, but I'm going to go ahead and stick with my guns and think that Wraxius gets this. Like I said, I think overall the special threats probably too much for Awesomeness to handle, and I think Awesomeness has a harder time winning as far as actual win conditions. It's probably just like milking the spikes, which is not a real plan because of the Fori, or just Charizard, I guess, DD Knight, maybe. But I think a lack of concrete win conditions for Captain Awesomeness is definitely real, whereas I could see multiple ways that Wraxius could get there. I could see her really grinding it out with the Fori. That is not easy for Awesomeness to deal with. Remember, the Spinner, the Claydol, does not beat Fori 1v1. I could see the special threats getting there. I could see the Metagross at the end. If Skarmory is down, I could see a Gilometa just cleaning up the game. I think there are simply more ways to win on Wraxius' side, so I'm going to go ahead and give her the nod, and therefore I've got it as 1-1 purple to orange right now. And that brings us to the C matchup. Man, I don't know what happened here. I definitely, through the first half of this, thought that Mongoose had the advantage over Kingu. I don't think there was much debate at all. I think some of the picks for Kingu in the early going were questionable, especially given what was on the other side. And yeah, I mean, first four versus first four, I really thought that Mongoose had the advantage. But later in this draft, I don't know, things kind of started to shift. The Medicham and the Flygon, those threats are very, very real. The fact that Kingu has not one but two Pokemon that Mongoose truly cannot switch into safely, that's kind of hard to ignore. That's kind of hard to dismiss. Like, the fact that Flygon, let's call it CB Flygon, can just click Earthquake for free, and there is nothing from Mongoose that can switch into that. I don't know how you ignore that. And then same thing with the Medicham. I mean, the Medicham I would not go CB. Flygon I would just go CB, and I'd be clicking Earthquake basically every time. But the Medicham, if it had a set like Fighting Attack, maybe even both Fighting Attacks, Brick Break, Focus Punch, Fighting Attack, Shadow Ball, Hidden Power, Flying, I look again, what switches into that? You've got the HP Flying part of it for the Venusaur and the Hariyama, and then the Fighting Shadow Ball coverage takes care of the Starmie and everything else. What switches into that? Like, at least with the Medicham, Mongoose has the chance to just out-predict it and dance around it, I guess, but it's still a big threat. But the Flygon, you don't even have that option. Every time the Flygon gets in safely, that Earthquake's coming, and you better duck and run. Those Pokemon are going to force Mongoose to build in a very, very specific way. He's going to have to basically EV everything to be able to tank CB Flygon Earthquake and then counterattack. So it's going to have to be a Starmie that always lives, end it as Ice Beam. A Hariyama that always lives, end it as counter. A Regirock and a Registeel that always live, and they have Boom. A Jolteon with HP Ice. A Glalie that always lives, end it as Ice Beam. So on and so forth, and that's what he's going to have to do to neutralize it. And then, like I said, then on top of that, there is the Medicham. I want to say Mongoose here. He's 6-0 for a reason. I think he's a good player. Man, it's hard. I want to predict Mongoose, but the Medicham and the Flygon are problems, man. And maybe the Flygon threat is overstated. Like I said, I mean, I think the way, if you're sitting in Mongoose's seat, bulky Ice Beam Starmie, bulky Counter Yama, bulky Boom Regirock, HP Ice Jolteon, Bulky Boom Registeel, Bulky Ice Beam Glalie. I feel like that is going to have to be the plan. You make it so literally every single Pokemon on your team can kill the Flygon. It's going to have to be that way because you cannot deal with it any other way. And then the Medicham, man, good luck. Just going to have to pivot a lot. The Medicham ultimately might be even worse, actually, for him than the Flygon. Because the Flygon, he can at least just one-hit KO with a lot of this stuff. But I don't know how the non-Boom users, I don't know how the Starmie, the Jolteon, etc., I don't know how those guys are one-hit KOing the Medicham. So the Medicham might be a nightmare, especially if he loads it up with Para support. I would not be surprised to see T-Wave T-Tar, T-Wave Regice, whatever support that he can give it, and then just try to let the Medicham and the Flygon go bananas. Ugh. Alright. I'm not listening to myself. I'm not listening to my gut here. I'm gonna predict Mongoose to win here. I think that he's a very good player and can figure it out, and he does have spikes that his opponent cannot remove, but the Medicham and the Flygon really, really changed this matchup, and hell, there might even be Scizor in the back, which is also a threat. I don't know why I'm predicting a large Mongoose. I guess I just have faith in him as a player, but it is scary now, and this matchup is much closer, I think, than it was supposed to be. But I'm going to go with Mongoose, and 0% surprised if that pick is utterly wrong and Kingu bulldozes over him, given some of these threats that Mongoose really doesn't have an easy time dealing with. So with that in mind, I have in this draft, I have TRowe over Darth Tyros, Wraxius Gaming over Captain Awesomeness, and I guess Mongoose over Kingu. Oh, man. We're on record. 2-1 Orange winning this draft. My predictions have been pretty good. I have a pretty high ratio, but not so sure about this one. We have a comment section for a reason. Let me know what you guys think, who you predict. Man, that C matchup is an interesting one. I can't wait to see it play out. Stay tuned for more content. Thank you for watching.